Reynolds Journalism Institute at the University of Missouri. Welcome to Global Journalist. I'm Josh Kransberg in for Jason McClure. Venezuela is a country that should, by all accounts, be doing quite well as one of the top oil-producing countries in the world. But the South American nation also has one of the highest murder rates in the world, a government whose officials are accused of selling drugs, and millions living below the poverty line. The country's economic situation is crumbling, with inflation soaring out of control. The national currency, the bolivar, has declined more than 90% on the black market in the last few years. This has caused shortages in even basic necessities like bread and toilet paper, causing long lines at stores. If that all wasn't bad enough, Venezuela is notorious for clamping down on journalists who challenge the government on these issues. The most recent World Press Freedom Index has Venezuela ranked 137th out of 180 countries when it comes to freedom of the press. On this edition of Global Journalist, we'll look at all of these issues and ask if there's hope for Venezuela's future. I'll talk to three journalists in Caracas in a few minutes, but joining me now is Diego Guerrero. He's an economist and investigator for ODH Consulting Group. Diego, thank you so much for joining us. My first question, when we were doing pre-interviews for the show, our producers asked you about the oil crisis and about ongoing food shortages, and you said all of these relate back to something about the dollar black market. While an American dollar is worth about 6 Venezuelan bolivars on the regular market, the black market is something completely different where it costs about 400 bolivars. Why does this black market exist, and how is it affecting the Venezuelan economy?
The Venezuelan black market is quite a problem related with policies from the government. There are approximately 3 prices to buy dollars in Venezuela. There is a market that is official, and a dollar is worth 6.3 bolivars. This exchange rate is used to import approximately 60 or 90% of Venezuelan imports. There is another official rate at 12 bolivars and another one at 198 bolivars. The problem is that these are really over-regulated markets. There is no transparency. We don't know which firms and which companies receive these dollars, and they are quite well known for very high corruption. So, in the middle of all of this, since 2004, it was produced a black market to buy and sell dollars in Venezuela. This black market in the last year has risen consistently. It has an upward trend. It is quite impressive because it is growing fast. In the last month, the black market has risen 30%. In the last year, since January, it has risen 200%.
And what's the cause behind this rise? What is causing it to rise so dramatically in such a short period of time?
Several things. First, inflation. The inflation in Venezuela is quite high, and the expectations for inflation are really high. And second, confidence. People have no confidence in the central bank policies and no confidence in the government. The government is doing nothing to tackle this problem. And there is sort of a paralysis in policies from the government. The government talks a lot about the black market, but it does actually nothing.
So, as of 2014, Venezuela has close to 300 billion barrels of oil, and it's the country's #1 export by a long shot. But people are obviously not seeing the benefits of most of this wealth, of any of it. Why is this happening?
Well, first of all, Venezuela missed a huge opportunity. While countries like Brazil increased its production by 100% since the 98, Venezuela diminished its production in 25%. We have an oil company that is quite badly managed, and we are using these resources in a non-transparent way. Most of the oil resources goes to a fund called the Fonden, and the Fonden is used in a politicized manner. We don't know how these resources are used. There is no transparency, no data, and we actually don't know if this goes to corruption, if this goes to political campaigns. The real thing is that for some years, Venezuelan poverty diminished thanks to these high rates, high prices of the oil. However, in the last year, we noticed that this diminishing of the poverty didn't obey to a structural change. People wasn't more productive. People didn't find better jobs. People just received more money from the government, and they did not much with it.
Okay, you mentioned, or I mentioned earlier, about the food industry crisis and the long lines and the food shortages and the basic necessities like toilet paper and bread and milk are basically non-existent. How is a country like this that is doing well economically by all intents and purposes, how is there a shortage of food and basic necessities like that?
Well, first of all, we know there is shortage, but we have no data, no transparency on how big is the scarcity in Venezuela. Since March 2004, we have absolutely no data on scarcity. The central bank produced an index called the scarcity index, and the last available data we have is 30%. Nowadays, we suppose it's a lot bigger because we see all these huge lines, and the government basically says, and these are declaration by the food minister, Carlos Osorio, he says that if there are lines, it's because people are buying products. If there are products in a place, there are lines, which is sort of a sarcastic way and not a really good way of facing this problem. The problem with the scarcity is related to two main concerns. First, an international concern, which is the oil price. Venezuela exports are 96% related with oil, which means that all the money we have, all the dollars we have available in the country are produced by PDVSA, the state oil company. And these are used to make imports. And imports in Venezuela have diminished 30% since 2012. That means that we cannot access to buys and goods that are bought abroad, right? And this produces scarcity. But there is a second problem, a more important problem that is structural and domestic. It is proper of the Venezuelan economy and the government policies. This is related with huge price controls, very important price controls that are stopping the firms from actually producing, and they have completely deleted the idea of prices from the people's mind. Most of the products that are missing, like toilet paper, coffee, milk, corn oil, shaving machines, all of these products are highly regulated. They are underpriced regulations. They are part of a strategy from the government that attacks the private sector. They don't cooperate with the private sector, expropriates the private sector, over-regulates the private sector. Not a single kilo or pound of food in the company is moved without the military support. The military controls every single distribution line of food in the country, and these regulations produce or they obstaculize the market economy, and they impede people to actually get what they need and to communicate the supply of the firms with the demand of the people. Most socialist economies, most economies that were highly regulated under price controls and that faced huge expropriations are used to do this kind of missing products and shortage and huge lines.
So my last question for you, it might be a simple question with a not so simple answer. Can this improve? Can the economy improve? Can Venezuela rebound? Can it bounce back from this ongoing issue?
Well, in fact, it should improve, but we don't have expectations that is going to happen because Venezuelan problems are public policy problems. To improve public policy problems, you need to have political will. And as I told you earlier, the government response has been paralysis, denial, and to radicalize the revolution or these policies that are producing these problems. Carlos Osorio, the Minister of Food, considers that there are no shortage. If there are lines, then the people have products. On the president, Nicolás Maduro, considers that the exchange rate is not a problem. If 630 is a good exchange rate for the economy, and it is going to last for all the year. So in fact, inflation, the exchange rate system, shortages, we know how to tackle these problems. The management of PDVSA, we know how to tackle this problem. However, the government will not do anything, and the expectations on both the government policies and the opposition policies are quite dim. And in Venezuela, people usually feels like we are actually kind of doomed to this problem.
It's a bleak outlook. Diego Guerrero, thank you so much for joining us on Global Journalist. We appreciate your insight.
Thank you.
Before we get to our next guests, a reminder that if you're interested in more Global Journalist content, visit us online at globaljournalist.org. There you can read in-depth articles on international affairs and free press issues. Plus, you can download past episodes from our archive. We're also on social media. You can like us on Facebook or follow us on Twitter. Our handle there is @GlobalJourn. Now let's move to another major issue facing Venezuela, the increasing crackdown on the press there. Joining me from Caracas, Nathalie Alvaray, a journalist at Runrunes, an independent news site. From El Nacional, a daily newspaper, Boris Saavedra, and Alex Vasquez. Boris is a freelancer there. Alex is there full time. Thanks to all of you for coming on the show and joining us. Nathalie, I want to start with you. Talk to me generally about the situation that the media is facing in Venezuela. Compare it to if journalists there are supporting the government's policies versus how they're treated if the government is not supporting if they're not supporting the government's policies. What's the difference there?
Well, Diego just painted a picture of the economic situation where he talked about we have no data, no transparency, and no access to public sources. That is what happens to journalists who are not friendly to the government. We cannot access public sources, so we don't have like the other side of the information. We have no data. All the data about crime rates and all the related stuff, it comes from NGOs, and we have no transparency in communication. There are, moreover, the government in the past 5 years have bought about 25 media outlets, directly bought or by friends of the government. So even if the journalists are not friendly to the government, the owners are, and are putting pressure on doing, on not telling this economic situation as it goes. Sorry, yes.
No, that's fine. Alex, I want to ask you, so Nathalie just referenced the companies that are buying up media outlets. How is that affecting journalism in the country?
Yeah, well, the government actually has bought a lot of television and newspapers and actually controls most of the media. And there are just a few newspapers that are actually free, and there is no television free. So if you wanna see, I don't know, if you wanna get informed about something, you have to go to the newspapers. And there are some radio stations that's still free, but the most of the media was blocked by the government. But actually, the government do not make the purchase directly. It's always a third person or a unknown company who actually do the transaction.
So it doesn't look like the government is actually buying media outlets. So it has its cover up.
Yeah, you actually don't know who is the real owner of the Cadena Capriles, who actually was a free media group, and right now you actually don't know who actually bought it. And the same thing is happening with the Globovisión, that is a TV channel. You don't know who are the really owners of the TV channel. So.
Boris, let me ask you, with all of these issues going on, have you ever been censored personally or harassed, and have you feared for your life if you publish a certain story?
Well, it's very difficult. When you on the street doing a journalist coverage, it's very difficult because in most of the event, you like a journal as a journalist, you have to coverage. The security officers, they don't give you the whole security for you. And well, yes, I'm being afraid for my life, or yes, it's very difficult, and I think that there is an action for the government to impress fear on the journalists to they can do his work.
Natalie, since the opposition protests about a year and a half ago started, what do sorry, let me rephrase that question. What do Venezuelan citizens think of Nicolas Maduro's government and its policies, even with the government sort of controlling the press there?
From a media standpoint of view about the buyouts of the media, the government says that there's the economic war and that private companies are causing the shortage of foods that we talked about in the first part of the program. But since they have the most important media and the ones that reach the most amount of people, if you ask citizens, like 67% of regular citizens think there is an economic war in Venezuela. So even if the approval of the president is going down, by all accounts of every consultant, the regular citizens, when asked, they think there is an economic war. That's the reason why they bought all this media. I worked at Cadena Capriles for 15 years, and even if we don't know the exact names of the owners, the actual Minister of Communication worked there when the company was bought, and she was like a kind of editorial counselor. So you have signs. So who bought these companies?
Alex, with this lack of press freedom and government having companies buy up media outlets, how is this affecting Venezuelan citizens? How do people get their information, or do people lack information? The web is still not the most popular source of getting news. So how are people getting news, and do they believe the news that they're getting?
Yeah, well, I think the people is going to the web. It's the only way you can know what is actually happening. For example, in 2014, there were a lot of manifestations here in the country against the government of Nicolas Maduro, and everybody knows what was happening, even though most of the media wasn't showing the reality. So people go to Twitter, and in Twitter you can know what's happening. People go to some web pages, and there are a lot of good web pages that most of them are new, but they're doing a really good job. Runrunes, for example, is a really good page, and a couple of days ago there was an confrontation between the police and some delictive group here in Caracas, and the media practically didn't say anything about it, but you can read in Runrunes everything what happened. You can see the pictures, you can see some videos. So people is going to the web. It's the only option, and I think it's the only option. And another thing, well, you see the official media saying that the economy is good, saying that there is a lot of food in the markets, but people know that's not true, because I think the crisis is very huge now, and no matter what you try to do in the public media, the people is not buying that information. I think there's a lot of people who is actually realizing that the crisis is really big right now, and you can see that in the polls. Almost 60% of the population wants a change right now.
Just a reminder, this is Global Journalist. I'm Josh Kransberg in for Jason McClure. Today we're looking at the multitude of problems facing Venezuela, including its struggling economy and its suppression of journalists in the country. Joining us today from Caracas, Nathalie Alvaray, a journalist at Runrunes, an independent news site, and a pair of journalists from El Nacional, a daily newspaper, Boris Saavedra, he's a freelancer there, and Alex Vasquez. Boris, I want to go back to the digital media part. Do you feel like the introduction of social media, Twitter, Facebook, do you think that's helped or hurt the cause in terms of a free press there?
Well, it's definitely helped the situation in Venezuela, just like to say, like Alex was saying. But it's important to precise, like everything, every information is sensitive in web. The journalists, they treat the information properly, and if any information get leaked in the digital media without a treatment for a good treatment for the journalists, well, can be dangerous, and that is the danger. And that is the danger when the media, the official big media, don't participate in that information.
Nathalie, I mentioned earlier you work for Runrunes, an independent news site. El Nacional is also one of those independent news sites. Talk to me about the day-to-day working at one of those sites, about your coverage and how you decide what to cover, and if you don't cover something out of fear of retribution or retaliation.
Well, we are a small team. This site is not that new. We are a small team, and we decided to put an investigative team together. So we don't do many breaking stories. We take them from other sites, and we do a weekly planning. At Runrunes, we decide we will cover at depth the issues that are important for the country. We all of the journalists that now work there come from other media, mostly from Cadena Capriles, where we were censored and we have to resign. And
let me go back to that real quick. You said you were censored and had to resign. What was the story what issues were you covering that we were forced to resign and censored?
We all have different stories. Tamoa Calzadilla, who was until a couple of weeks ago part of our team, she was the director of investigative unit at Cadena Capriles, and they were with Laura Weffer. They were reporting a story about the protesters that Alex just told, and the director wanted the journalists to tell that they were financed by the U.S. That the protesters were financed, that the United States was giving them money, and they didn't want to say that. So in protest, they resigned. No? That's one of the cases. I was a media VP at Cadena Capriles, and with the new owners, I received a lot of pressure about giving orders to put down some content that was on the web. Mainly, there were a lot of things, but mainly a video that showed during this protest last year that it was the police who shot the protesters and not the protesters among themselves. So there are a lot of cases, and Nacional also has a lot of stories. But going back to the question, we have no fear, or we do, but we try to report as clearly as we can and as deeply as we can the issues that we can tackle. We have received threats. This week, on Monday, there was a confrontation among police, and the delinquents. Alex also told us that we have received phone threats about this, but this hasn't stopped us until now, until today.
Boris, as a freelancer, you work at different outlets around the country. Do you see the same thing? Are you seeing the same thing in newsrooms around the country?
Yes, it's the same thing, and we're receiving. I receive threatening by my social media accounts, and just for reporting where I was when I was there. Okay, and that is a difficult situation because. With that scenario, the journalists can be tempted by self-censorship, and that's it. That's very dangerous for the citizens.
I'm going to go down the line. We only have a few minutes left. Alex, I'm going to start with you. I'm going to pose the same question to you that I posed to Diego earlier. He was talking about the economy, but I'm asking you about journalism. Do you see the situation improving at all? Will the country eventually or hopefully open up to the press, or will it continue to crack down on journalists there?
Well, it's very dark panorama. I think everything is depending on this year election. This year, Venezuela have to choose the Congress, and I think everything depends on that. Most of the people want to change. If you change the Congress, you can control the government, you can control the excess of the government, and you can start to make an improvement. But it's very difficult. The government has won 18 of the 19 elections that they've done, the Chavismo. So it's very difficult to win an election. They control the electoral system, but the people have faith. The people want to go, and the people want to vote. So I think everything is depending on that. If you win the Congress, you can control the power, and you can start the change that the country needs.
Boris, you'll have about 30 seconds, then Nathalie will have about 30 seconds. So Boris, your take on this.
Nathalie, if you want to share something, go on.
Well, we have a long run to go. We have to bet on investigative journalists, find funding for that. Even if if the opposition doesn't win the elections, we have to do a lot of collaborative journalism. This is not a time for competition among media outlets, the free ones. It's for collaborative. The small ones with the big ones, the ones who have high traffic with the ones who have low traffic, do investigation in putting teams together and using the scarce resources. We in Runrunes made an alliance with Tal Cual, which is Teodoro Pekov newspapers, who has 9 lawsuits. And we're doing this alliance because we want to help them and help us to have a voice. So we have a long path to walk, but I think this is the way to do it. Collaboration among us.
And we're going to have to leave it there. That'll do it for this edition of Global Journalist, a production of the Reynolds Journalism Institute and the Missouri School of Journalism. Many thanks to Diego Guerrero, Nathalie Alvaray, Boris Saavedra, and Alex Vasquez for coming on the program. Global Journalist producers this week are Inez Gaviria and Nassim Benchaban. Our studio director is Travis McMillan from RJI, and our audio engineer is Pat Akers of KBIA. For all of us here at Global Journalist, I'm Josh Kransberg. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.